Okay, so working on my 1992 Toyota Hilux again. And what's happening is when I go into two-wheel drive, the front drive shaft continues to spin. It's not locked in. I can grab it and stop it if the rear wheels are jacked in the air, but however, it continues to spin. And that shouldn't be happening. So this is the transfer case here. Here's the rear drive shaft. Front drive shaft's on the other end. This is the back of the transfer case right here. This is the actuator motor right there. So I undid a few plugs. This plug goes right back here. This plug goes onto this plug, and this plug was on this bolt. I took like this. Oops. Just like that. So I took out, undid this plug, undid this plug, took out, loosened one, took out one, loosened one, and loosened one. I'm going to take this front plate off right here. If you take this plate off, you can pull a gear out so that you leave the shift rod in the transfer case here, and then you can pull off this whole transfer motor with the 3 bolts, one here, one over here, and one up on top here. So that's the plan. So first thing to do is take off this cover so I can get at this big gear to take it out, so I can pull this whole assembly off, leaving the shift rod behind. So I got the little cover to crack loose here, and the first thing that happens is a bunch of black dirty differential fluid is coming out. Whoop, oh, there it goes. And I don't think it's supposed to be full of differential fluid. It's probably better. It's probably better than being full of water, so that's maybe a good thing. I see the O-ring stayed behind right there, so I don't want to lose that O-ring. So I'm going to gently peel that O-ring off. It goes in this groove right in that case there, so I want to save that O-ring. I don't see any water, just dirty black differential fluid, but I don't see any water coming out yet. Okay, I'm going to run it in the cab and see how that looks like. Okay, so I just pulled this little gear off. That just slid out, the pin stayed behind, that's fine. It was like, it should actually have been like that, but in fact it was like that. So when I pulled it out, it allowed this shaft to pop backwards an extra couple of millimeters. I could actually show you how much. Oh. Okay, that's how it was. And when I turn the front drive shaft, see the rear drive shaft trying to move? So, if I pull this gear back off, you'll see up here, this gap shrinks up and the shifter pit rod moves farther out. Let's just pull it out. There. See that? It's still not hitting the aluminum casing, but it's out as far as it can go now. Now when I try to turn the front drive shaft, the rear drive shaft doesn't do anything. Now it's completely disengaged from the front. And it doesn't take much movement there. Take off this breather line here. Mine is separated from the wherever it attaches up here. If you look right up there, you can see it's no longer on its nipple. So that may have sucked in water and dirt and who knows whatever, because it runs down through the line and then eventually ends up into here. So we'll take this apart and we'll have a look inside and see what it looks like. Okay, I've got the 3 bolts out here, here, and here. I took the breather line off, 2 electrical connectors off. Now you can see this just pops right off. It's got a rubber O-ring, so it's a little bit of resistance. Oof. Well, it's on there pretty good. That's it. She just comes right off. There's this O-ring in here. Careful with it. I will take it to the bench. Have a look. So now it's engaged. The front and rear are engaged, and I got sprung a leak. Now the front is free. You can see it only takes this much push right there, that little bit, and it's trying to engage the synchronizer. And I was about that much too far in, so I think that this is somehow wasn't coming all the way out. Because there it's trying to spin the rear, and that's only moving the tiniest of little bit. That could be my problem, because now, with it all the way out, the front drive shaft seems certainly pretty free. Okay, let's check that out on the bench. Okay, I've got the truck running in 5th gear on jack stands. You can see that the rear drive shaft is turning at full speed. There's the rear drive shaft turning full velocity. The front drive shaft is kind of barely turning. If I just push even 1 millimeter on this shaft, the front drive shaft takes right off. I can even just easily just grab it by hand and just stop it quite simply, quite easily now. So it's clear that this shaft, there, that's spin the drive shaft at full speed, that little bit of movement. It's pretty clear to me the front, the shaft was not coming out far enough. Okay, we'll just whip these bolts out and see how it looks. Oh, it must have an O-ring also. Okay, well that looks not too bad. Yeah, there's water in here. This camera doesn't focus in on tight shots that well. But right on here, if I get a clean spot, you can see how wet it is. And down here, this looks pretty good. There's a little bit of sand in there. I'm going to clean that up and put new grease on it. Okay, so I'm coming to the conclusion. I took it apart. Everything looks actually pretty good. I'm coming to the conclusion that when they installed this gear at the factory, unless somebody's been in here since the original installation at the factory, it was put on 1 tooth out. This rod, the rod that slides the shift rod that runs the forks inside the transfer case, it has to be at its fully extended position before this gear is meshed, and it wasn't. Because this gear runs off those contacts we saw on the other side, it'll never change its position. If this gear is put on before that rod is fully extended, it'll never be able to run to its full extension, which will cause the synchro mesh to drag. So when I reinstall it, I'm going to try moving this 1 tooth that way, have this gear fully extend, or this rod, shift rod, fully extended then to its maximum, and then all it'll do is when it goes all the way in, it'll be 1 tooth out going all the way in. But the same amount of teeth of travel are designed so it was going in a little bit too far and not coming out far enough. And that's what I think is happening. So I'm going to reinstall it with this 1 tooth out, and we'll see if that cures the problem. Okay, so here we are. I got the 3 big bolts back in, ready to put the gear on. I've got the, I've ensured that the shaft is fully extended and it does not touch the case. There's a little gap right in there that's allowed to have that small gap and be fully extended. Before I had quite a large gap. So now this gear should go on. So the trick is to have this gear absolutely free when it goes on. No stress on it at all. In other words, this gear is not binding on this gear in any way. Okay, so I had it all back together and went for a quick little test drive in and out of 4-wheel drive several times and parked back in the garage, and I'm just gonna have a quick just a quick recheck. And everything looks perfect. Okay, you can see now I just positioned this gear on. It can go anywhere. Once this drive wheel has rotated till it's with the electrical contacts called full extension of this shift rod up top, then this gear goes in place. And you can see right now it's got no stress on it. And this shift rod is at its farthest extension, and this electrical gear drive is happy. So you should put this on with no stress. When I first took this apart earlier today, this gear I couldn't get it off by hand. I had to use a screwdriver to pry it off because it was holding that shift pin or that shift shaft in about a couple millimeters engaging into the transmission. Now it's fully extended. This just slides on like it should. You can ignore this yellow mark, it doesn't have any meaning anymore. And with this shift shaft fully extended, I still have that's about 0.65 of a millimeter of space between the end of the shift shaft and the casing. So it's not hitting the casing, it's hitting on its snap ring like it's supposed to inside the transfer case. So I believe this is the correct way that this should be assembled. I don't know how it got mixed up or messed up before, but this way looks 100% proper, and I no longer have drag on the front drive shaft anymore. So that's it, all fixed up.